Morning guys, Al here from AM Training. Some people are asking me about stretching the hip flexors. How can I effectively stretch the hip flexors? So let's go ahead and start off with the real basic one real quick for a hip flexor. Alright, so my favorite way of stretching out the hip flexor is, yeah, everyone knows this common hip flexor stretch, but two things you want to do if you want to really get a really good hip flexor stretch is when you are in this position, you want to make sure that you're not Donald ducking it. It was basically what I call it. It's basically where you're tilting your pelvis anteriorly or forward. So imagine if your pelvis is a cup. Basically when people stretch their hip flexors, they think they're getting a lot of a stretch, but all they're doing is using their lumbar spine to extend through and it's not getting that really perfect stretch in that hip flexor. So when you have that cup, you want to imagine tilting and pouring water from the backside of your butt there. So you want to tilt back. So when that happens, see, I'm Donald ducking it right now, but if I were to bring in my pelvis in, basically what that did is now it locks in that pelvis and you get more of that stretch coming from that hip flexor. So that's a basic stretch there for the hip flexors, but what I like to do is where it relies on the concave convex rule. Basically what that is here, I got a visual for you. Here is your pelvis and here's your hip right here. When you are stretching backwards to get that hip flexor stretch, the femur is going backwards, but what is happening is that the the convex part of the ball and socket joint, it's actually gliding forward. So even though that femur is traveling backwards, there's also a forward movement in that ball and socket. So what helps with that, to get more of a stretch in the anterior capsule of that hip, is to actually use a really heavy band. Well, one that I usually get mine from elitefts. Get a super heavy one. Right now it's not super heavy. I'm at work and I'm doing this just for demonstration purposes. So basically this is pulling it forward. It's going to help glide that femur forward while you're stretching it back. And basically that's going to help out with that range of motion. I usually find this really helpful for me when I have, because my left hip, I have pain when I extend through at the top of a deadlift. And what that tells me is that maybe it might be impinging and I'm not really gliding as much as I want. So I do a couple of this stretch for my left, a couple of sets of this stretch for my left hip, and that definitely gets a nice extension through and I don't have any pain at the top of the deadlift. My right hip, on the other hand, it tends to benefit. I have pain when I'm at the bottom of a squat, and what that tells me, I'll get into that later, but let's go ahead and focus with this one right now. So with this stretch, it tends to open up the hip in a way that will help you extend your hip and also externally rotate your hip. So if you have any problems extending your hip and externally rotating, this is the stretch for you. Alright, so here's some real quick notes on how to get the best stretch for your hip flexor and that hip capsule. So you want to start off with a really heavy band, and when you do place it, you want to place it right at your thas. Yeah, guess what a thas is? It's your thigh / ass. Right in the middle, right where that line, that line where it becomes your thigh, or right becomes your ass. So your thas. Anyways, make sure it's right up high up in there, and it's real strong, so then in order to have that strong pull, it'll help glide that ball forward, and you'll get more of that stretch, stretching that anterior capsule of your hip there. And when you are stretching, you want to make sure that you are posteriorly tilting your pelvis so you get more of that stretch and not getting it from your back or anything like that. You want to get from the hip rather than compensate from the back. So those are the quick notes there.